What if pain-free birth was possible? Wouldn't you want to know that? Should pain-free birth be a goal for women who want to have a beautiful birth experience or a natural birth experience? And a lot of my critics don't think so. They'll say things like, you're getting women's hopes up. And I just want to address them. We have swung so far in the other direction as a society to believing that birth has to be painful. Well, I don't believe that. What is the dream in your heart for birth? Welcome back to the podcast, ladies. Today I have a solo episode talking all about what is pain-free birth and should that be our goal for labor? If you've been following me for any length of time, you may have heard some of the criticisms surrounding pain-free birth. First of all, it's a pretty radical concept in today's day and age. In our culture and society, even the term pain-free birth is a bit radical. It's a bit even offensive. And I chose that term on purpose because it's so disruptive. And the reason why is because I believe we have swung so far in the other direction as a society to believing that birth has to be painful and horrible and suffering, and that that's just the way it is. And it's just a curse and a burden that women have to bear. Well, I don't believe that. And so I went the complete opposite direction and said, I'm going to name my company, my business, my course, Pain-Free Birth, because I want a little bit of that shock and awe value. Admittedly, I also 100% believe it is entirely possible for women to attain a pain-free birth. And I myself had 3 of them. Now, if we want to get technical, yes, I had some contractions here or there that were painful. In my first early labor, I had the pushing phase hurt a bit more, but overall, I was laughing in transition. I was enjoying myself. I said, I'm having fun. And it was the most supernatural, incredibly ecstatic, blissful, most connected experience I've ever had in my life. It was the peak moment for me in all of my births to be able to feel my body working so well and communing with Holy Spirit and Jesus and feeling so connected, and at the same time processing my own thoughts and fears and observing them. And it was just, if you haven't heard my story yet, go back to episode, it's either 1 or 2, and you will hear my first birth story that started this whole thing. So that's not what this episode is about. But what I want to address here is, should pain-free birth be a goal for women who want to have a beautiful birth experience or a natural birth experience? And a lot of my critics don't think so. They'll say things like, you're getting women's hopes up. And it's not possible. Birth is supposed to be painful. I'm sure many of you have heard this, and I see it in my comments, not as much anymore, but especially in the early days. Many will say, you're setting women up for disappointment, or they'll say you're shaming women who've had negative birth experiences and painful birth experiences. Or birth is supposed to be painful. It's in the Bible. It's part of the curse. And I probably should do a whole podcast episode on that topic alone, because I get so many questions about it all the time. If that's something you want to hear, shoot me a message and let me know. Some will say that this is toxic word of faith teaching and it's name it and claim it nonsense, and that you shouldn't be teaching this because it's unbiblical. And other people will say this is damaging to women to be able to talk about birth, that birth could be like this when it's really not this good, and it's going to just damage women and get their hopes up, and they'll feel like a failure, and they'll feel like, their faith wasn't high enough. And so this is damaging to women, and all of these criticisms I've heard over the years, and I just want to address them. So I've heard all of these criticisms over the years, and it's not the first time, and I'm not the first person to be criticized for new and unconventional views about this topic. In fact, pain-free birth has even been around for a long time. If you go back to the 50s, Grantley Dick Reed was talking about pain-free birth. and observing women having pain-free birth, laughing their babies out and having joy and ecstasy in labor. And he wrote about it back then. And guess what? They called him a quack for it because he was an obstetrician and wanted to know how some women were able to have pain-free birth and how it was even possible. And he was ridiculed and shamed for it. So I'm not the first one to come up with this idea, and I won't be the last. I didn't come up with it. It's been around for years. Back in the 80s, there was a book released called Supernatural Childbirth. You may have heard of it. It's by Jackie Mize, and she teaches in there about pain-free birth and shares lots of testimonies of women having babies without pain. In fact, that was the first book I got my hands on that even gave me faith and hope that this was even possible for me. But then I asked the Lord and said, I need to know that this is happening for women today. So I went on a hunt to find women who are having births that were pain-free, that were my age, because that book was written in the 80s and the babies, like, I'll date myself here, but I was born in the 80s. And so the babies being born in that book, in the birth stories, were my age now. And I'm like, okay, God, I need an update. I need to know this is still happening today. And so there have been lots of pioneers, lots of people speaking about birth. Ina May Gaskin has shared extensively, and many other midwives, about supernatural midwifery and the mind-body connection and the effect of the role of our hormones and endorphins on labor. And so this is not a new concept, but it is certainly a controversial one. And in the natural birth community, even in the birth community at large, we see a lot of dividing lines. It's like people want to put birth in boxes. And so you've got the natural birth community versus the medicated community. The women that want an epidural and pain medicine and believe that epidurals are God's gift to women, that science has produced this beautiful, miraculous drug as a gift for us, and we should, of course, use it. Why would we have to suffer for no reason when this is available? And the natural birth community believes oppositely that natural birth is quote unquote better or higher or, more effective. And we admire that more. We've got vaginal birth or cesarean, and many women feel shame when they have to have a cesarean, and many people want a vaginal birth and believe that's better. And there are some obvious benefits to vaginal birth and natural birth. But the point is that we don't have to categorize one as good and the other as bad, or one is better than the other. And so the same thing happens when in my community, I talk a lot about pain-free birth and how it's possible and teaching women how to do it. And then, of course, there's the backlash of, well, if you don't have a pain-free birth, does that mean your faith wasn't high enough? Does that mean you're broken and you didn't do it right? And none of those are true. And so there can be a lot of division in the birth community, a lot of judgment, and a lot of criticisms, understandably so, from women who feel like they're being put down because they didn't have a pain-free birth, or perhaps they're being put down because they had a medicated birth and didn't have a natural birth, or they had a cesarean and that wasn't what they planned because they wanted a vaginal birth. And so they feel like less of a mother because they weren't able to have the standard or the goal or achieve this imaginary goal that they had. And I completely understand if that's you, if you have been in the seat of a woman who felt incredibly disappointed by her birth experience and maybe even judged by the natural birth community or the supernatural birth community, if we're going to call it that. And I do see this a lot in the faith camp, the Christians and the people who believe in supernatural childbirth. And many even read that book and became disillusioned when it didn't happen for them. They got their faith up so high and then labor hit and they were in pain. They had to maybe be transferred to the hospital, or it ended in a cesarean. And then they're mad at God because, well, God didn't give me the pain-free birth. I must not have prayed hard enough. I must not have had high enough faith. And it created a wound and shame and a disillusionment, a disappointment, if you will. And I think a lot of people have experienced that. And so there's a lot of reactions. There's a lot of triggers in this birth space. And there's a lot of women on the journey of becoming more educated and informed about what is possible in birth. And so I feel like I want to address this from and give a different picture. As I was preparing for my doula mastermind call, which is an incredible group of women, and I absolutely adore them. We just launched this recently. It's the first time that I opened doors on a doula mastermind. You may have heard about it. If not, definitely keep your eye out for the next time we open doors because they're closed right now. But we have over 50 women in this group who are all training to become pain-free birth certified doulas. And I'll just leave it at that. But it is such an incredible group, and we're really going deep into a lot of these topics. And I realized that many of them, as a pain-free birth certified doula, which is what they're working toward, are going to be working with clients who may have pain-free births, may not, who may have medicated births, may have natural births. And we have to be able to have conversations about this without making pain-free birth the standard or without making natural unmedicated birth the standard. Because when one thing is the standard or the goal, then it means the other thing is less than. It means that you are a failure or you didn't do it right if you didn't have the goal of pain-free birth. And I absolutely don't want any woman to feel that way. And so I said to my doulas in this call, we're going to scrap that whole hierarchy, that whole thing that says like pain-free birth is like the top of the scale. And we're going to judge everything based on this. And I even have women tell me like, well, it was when they tell me their birth story, well, it wasn't pain-free, but, and I'm like, you guys, I'm not as invested in your birth being pain-free as you might think. I think it's amazing when it is because I absolutely believe it's possible. And yes, I did name my Instagram account and my course after that because I wanted to shake the cage. I wanted to rattle people's feathers. But that doesn't mean everyone has to achieve a pain-free birth. And so I said, instead of making the goal pain-free or unmedicated or natural, what if we made the goal women feeling completely confident and empowered and educated in their birth experience? Women who are owning their birth and taking full responsibility for it. As a doula, that is my goal with all my clients. And I'm going to meet you exactly where you are. And if you come to me saying, I have all this birth trauma, I have all this baggage, I'm believing for a vaginal birth and a birth that is peaceful and not traumatic, a birth where I'm in charge of my body and things aren't just being done to me. That's the goal I'm going to align with. And if you want to go further and say, I want to believe for joyful birth, amazing. Let's prepare for that. Let's believe for that. Or I want to prepare for, a birth with no interventions. I want my body to do it all. I don't want to rely on the medical system or drugs. And I don't want to be numbed and separated from the birth experience or from my baby. And I want the golden hour. And yes, let's go, girl. Or I want pain-free birth and let's believe for that. Or supernatural and amazing. I'm going to meet you wherever your faith is. I'm going to give you the resources you need to say, okay, I can do this. And if your faith is like, supernatural, pain-free, unmedicated, like angels showing up in your delivery room, amazing. I'll believe with you. I am not going to sit here and say that's not possible. I mean, if it's truly not possible, I will tell you the truth. I'm not here to just like name it and claim it and make stuff up, but I am continually impacted by my own students' birth stories that stretch even my faith. And I read stories that I think I didn't even know that was possible. And so that is one of the greatest things about my job is like, I am continually blown away by God and by the incredible strength and beauty of the women who share their stories with me. And so I'm going to meet you where you are. And it kind of brings me to what I like to tell my students in my course who take my course and the doulas who are learning from me. I tell them, listen, get your faith up, get your hopes up. If you're pregnant, no matter where you're coming from, no matter what your history is, no matter what anybody's told you, I want you to know you have permission from me to get your hopes up because that's often the criticism as well. If you get your hopes up, you're going to be let down. And so we think if I just keep the bar really low, if I lower my expectations, then I can't be disappointed. And that's a terrible way to live. I'm sorry, but I refuse to believe that that's going to get us anywhere. You can believe opposite of me. That's okay. But here's what I say. We have to have a balance to that because it can't just all be name it and claim it. Pray this prayer and you'll have a supernatural pain-free birth and get your hopes up, get really excited, but you don't have any working knowledge of your physiology and the way your body works in labor. You haven't done the work to address and confront your inner fears and inner demons and trauma. You haven't looked at where you got your view of birth from and what's still stuck in your bag. Like all of this is what I teach in my course. And I help you actually unpack all of those mindsets and patterns and ways of thinking and ways of being and what our belief system is surrounding birth and what our belief system is in ourself and the relationship we have to our bodies, the relationship we have toward motherhood, toward our own mother, toward what is it going to mean for me when I become a mother? What does labor mean? How am I going to respond to the stress and the pressure and the intensity of a contraction if I'm not prepared, if I don't know how to breathe, if I don't know how to relax my body, if I don't know how to sink in deep and be present with myself? How do I open my pelvic floor? Like there are so many things we cover in the Pain-Free Birth course, and I give you the practical techniques and the mindset shift to actually make this possible. And so here's what I tell my students. Yes, get your hopes up and hold birth loosely. Hold birth with an open hand because we can't control what happens. We can't control what happens in labor. We can't always control what position our baby is in or when labor starts or what exactly happens and what baby does. Now, there are a lot of ways that we can prepare for birth. We can prepare our bodies for birth. We can prepare our pelvic floor for baby to get in a good position, but we can't control everything. We can control our thoughts. And guess what? Our thoughts control our hormones, and our hormones in labor control and dictate how much pain we feel or what we perceive in our body as pain. So the more you get into this, the more you realize how much power you really do have while still knowing that this is outside my control, that this is something that I can surrender to God because I have so much trust in my body. I have so much trust in the way He created my body to birth that I can let go. I can surrender. And that, my friends, is the epitome of trusting birth. That is women being in their feminine energy. And guess what? Birth flows from the feminine energy. The feminine is trusting. She is releasing. She is surrendered. And that is the place we birth from, not control, not tension, not clinging, not fighting to fix it and work it out. It's release. It's surrender. And so hold birth loosely and get your hopes up. The reason that you can get your hopes up is because you can trust in the physiology. You can trust in the way God designed your body. And this is not just a faith thing. This is not just a Christian thing. This is a design thing. This is the way the female body is designed and operates at a hormonal physiological level. And the more you discover the truth of that, the more confident you'll be because you have the blueprint within you. This is entirely possible. And when you understand that, it's really, truly even scientific even. Like, this is not just a abstract, maybe it happens and God comes down and shines upon you and the angels sing and you have this supernatural pain-free birth. No, this is scientific. It is the way it happens when we do certain things and follow the blueprint, the hormonal blueprint that is physiological birth. I really believe that physiological birth is God's design for a pain-free birth. And then when you add in faith with your understanding of birth physiology, then when you call God on His promises and say, hey, I'm believing for a redemptive birth. I'm believing for a joyful birth. I'm believing that my birth plan is going to go this way. And even when you ask for specifics, you would be shocked, women, to understand and hear how many of my students write down specifically what they want in their labor, what they want to happen, as if you could make it up and have it exactly as you wanted. I mean, nobody tells you to do this. This is why my course is so different. This is why everything I teach is so radically different, because no one else would say that. Like, of course, you're going to set up people for disappointment. And yet, How many women come to me saying, oh my gosh, it happened exactly the way I planned. Everything I asked God for happened, or these specific things that I asked God for, maybe not everything on the list, but like these specific things happened. My baby was born at this time. My baby was born on this date. My baby weighed this much. This is when this happened. This is how this happened. And it is remarkably, like supernaturally, eerily exactly what they prayed for and asked God for. And some of us don't even think to ask. Well, what does the Bible say? You have not because you ask not. And so what if we did get our hopes up? What if it was possible? What if pain-free birth was possible? Wouldn't you want to know that? It's kind of like if all you knew about marriage was screaming and yelling and pain and anger and disappointment and abandonment, if that was your view of marriage growing up and that's what you saw in your family, then you might believe that like men are just evil or the patriarchy is abusive. Men will leave you. Men will hurt you. You would probably develop, depending on what your experience was, your lived experience, your normal, you may believe that this is just how it is. And you might say, I don't ever want to get married because marriage is bondage. Marriage is prison. Marriage is, to be hurt. But what if someone showed you a healthy marriage filled with love and grace and beauty and understanding and fulfillment? And they said, hey, it's possible for you to have this. It doesn't come automatically. You have to work at it. You have to learn some skills. You might have to learn how to communicate. You might have to deal with your trauma and your triggers and learn how to be selfless and confront your fears and all of those things. But I can teach you some skills and principles so that you too can have a healthy, fulfilling marriage. Would you want that? Would you want to be loved? Would you want to experience this kind of ecstatic, beautiful love? And you could certainly say, no, thanks. I like my view. I'm going to keep my toxic boyfriend or skip from one relationship or partner to another and hold on to this belief that men are evil and the patriarchy is oppressing me. And I like that. That's working for me. You could certainly say that. So rather than make something black and white, because nothing is ever black and white. So whether it's marriage or finances or parenting or anything else in life, we all pick up our own subconscious belief systems. And when someone challenges our belief system, it's uncomfortable. When someone shows you something that you didn't know was possible, it challenges all of your beliefs and your experience. And you might have to be confronted with the idea that maybe you've been lied to. Maybe your experience isn't the only experience or possibility. Maybe you've been duped. And that's an awful feeling when we are clinging to that worldview or that belief system so strongly. And it may even have been your lived experience. But at the end of the day, we have to take responsibility for our relationships, our finances, our birth experience, and our entire life. So rather than look at birth as if it's black and white, because nothing is ever black and white, we can look at it as simply another realm of possibility. We can look at it as something that may challenge our current belief system or model of the world. And rather than pushing back against that and getting upset, what if we just held it in our hand and got curious? What if we said, what if birth could be pain-free or supernatural? What if this was possible? And what if it was even possible for me? And so rather than ranking birth or categorizing birth or putting birth in boxes of pain-free, not pain-free, medicated, not medicated, and judging those categorizations as good or bad, or better or worse. What if we just accepted what is, while also believing for what God put in our heart for birth? And maybe for you, that's something completely different than a pain-free or a supernatural birth. Maybe for you, you're believing for a birth that is intimately connected with your partner, where you feel comfortable and loved and supported. What is the dream in your heart for birth? How do you categorize birth? And in what ways have you put birth in a box? In what ways have you made assumptions or assessments about birth and how it's supposed to be? And who told you that it had to be that way? Who says birth has to be painful, terrible, or whatever it is? Fill in the blank. So I'm asking you, I suppose, in this conversation, would you like to hold or cling to your limited experience of birth based on your lived experience, your life? Maybe that's your own birth experiences or the birth experiences that you have witnessed or heard about from movies, TV, friends, family, the narrative that was told to you about how birth is. Maybe your Sunday school teacher taught you that birth is supposed to be painful, and so therefore that must be true. You have the option now to cling to what you've been told or experienced about childbirth, and you get to decide. And what do you want to experience in birth? Because wherever you're at on your faith journey, wherever you're at on your journey of taking full ownership and autonomy for your birth experience, I am there to support you, sister. I am there to cheer you on. And I am there to say, hey, you're not crazy. You're not crazy for believing that birth can be redeeming and supernatural and empowering and beautiful. And whatever your desire is for birth, I trust that Holy Spirit put that desire in your heart. I trust that that is in your journey and in your path for you to discover. I trust that your journey into motherhood is going to be edified by your birth experience, and that whatever's coming up is part of that journey. And you are equipped and strong enough, mama, to handle it. You are equipped and strong enough to heal. You are ready for this. And if you want to learn about how pain-free birth could be possible, and the skills and techniques and the physiology, the literal science behind how pain-free birth is possible, I invite you into the pain-free birth course where I detail all of this out. And thousands of women have now gone through this program. Many of them, about half of them, actually experience pain-free birth. Majority of them experience vaginal birth. And almost all of them say that they felt more equipped and empowered in their birth experience to take charge, to be autonomous, to be empowered and use their voice, no matter what happened in their birth experience. And that is the best kind of birth to me, is that you felt empowered, you felt educated, and you felt equipped to handle whatever happened. Even if it went completely against your birth plan and everything that wasn't supposed to happen happened, I want to know, did you feel empowered? Did you feel like your voice was honored and your desires were heard? That's what matters, because women will not remember what happened in their birth as much as they will remember how they were made to feel. And as a doula, that is my priority, that you feel empowered. And being empowered means that you know your options, you're speaking using your voice, and you're owning your birth experience. If you want to learn the ins and outs of pain-free birth, I have a special discount code for you in the show notes for 10% off the pain-free birth course. And if you, of course, if this episode helped you or edified you in any way, I would love it if you could write a 5-star review. I'm cheering you on, girl, all the way. And if you're struggling right now to have faith for a pain-free birth or the birth that you're believing for, you can borrow my faith. You can just borrow mine, because I have complete trust and confidence that you are created for this, sister. I'll see you next week.